Well, good morning and welcome to this early morning video. I had a prompt this morning to read from the white edition, Book A, which is the completely unedited text. I believe nowadays the Foundation for Inner Peace book is much the same, and the Sparkly book, etc., etc. But the white edition has no subtext numerics, page numbers, no chapter headings, no nothing. It's almost like a conversation with somebody where, I mean, if you're having a conversation, you don't say line 65 at the end of the line, and you don't say you don't have a title for the thing you want to talk about. You just start talking. It's just back and forth, right? And when people read the white edition, they often tell me, and I've had this many, many times, that it's different to reading any of the other books, any of the other editions. And if you wanted to check out the video I made about the white edition, how that came about, you can. It's in the library of my my videos there somewhere. Going back a way now, but you'll find it in my older videos. I think the thumbnail of the video I'm wearing a Pink Floyd, like a denim baseball cap with Pink Floyd or something on it, and there's a wooden fence behind me. That might be good for those of you who are visual. But anyway, I wanted to read, or I was prompted to read something from the course to demonstrate, I suppose, and I'm just clutching at straws here, but demonstrate the difference. To demonstrate what it is to read living conversation, living talk, living information, rather than to have that broken up mentally by some included aspect of transfer that is, I'm looking for the words here, that is controlled in a certain sense by the way it's presented. Okay? With the subtext numerics, chapters and titles and all of that sort of stuff, table of contents and all of this. So, and there's no better or worse, okay? Whatever edition of the book you have, is fine. I just wanted to, I guess, present this, or this is what I've been given to present this morning. One of the things I always address in our Zoom meetings when we do the reviews of the first 50 lessons is the minds, oh, it sounds like I'm saying minds, the spirits, that's better, it's clearer, capacity to simply read the words on the page without connecting with them, right? And we do that for a specific reason. And I always use the analogy of sitting at an airport or a bus station or something, waiting for your transport, and you just buy a magazine. You're not really interested in reading the magazine that much. You just want something that you think would align with your values and whatever. You're at the store and in the transit state, and you pick something you think might be somewhat interesting, and you're really buying it to fill in time until you're waiting for the train to arrive or the aeroplane or whatever. So that tends to transfer to everybody's relationships, definitely my relationships. There tends to be, and I've noticed it a lot, there tends to be this, when you're having a conversation with somebody, and I'm sure everyone will relate to this, someone will start talking to you, and you'll already formulate your answer while they're talking, and then if they switch tack in their thing, you'll formulate the next answer and whatever, and then it gets a bit hard to try and remember what it is that you wanted to say, and all the while you're not really listening. You're stuck in your own thoughts, in analysis and preparation and all of this sort of stuff, which is a defense, a conscious defense against listening, true listening. Right? To listen, one must hold an open mind and allow for this moment, which is the only moment there actually is, to be the place you listen from, with an understanding that I've never actually heard anything before, if this is the only moment there is. Everything I think I could formulate as a response comes from an idea of something I was undergoing in the past, which as a spiritual student, let's say, I'm now learning to let go of, right? So even learning to listen needs to be addressed as part of the radical undergoing of the release of defenses against the present moment. And yesterday in our Zoom, this is a little sort of aside, I thought it was kind of funny, but yesterday in our Zoom, I was talking about the superficial nature of relationships on the surface level, where people tend to fill in time by having these meaningless circular conversations about the weather, about somebody's dog, about all these sorts of things that are repetitive. And if you don't engage with those, it leaves this kind of empty gap that can become uncomfortable, like a pregnant pause. So, and Tyna will post that up shortly and you'll be able to watch it. And then I had the experience about an hour or two after that of being in the fish and chip shop when I went up to do some shopping in Brisbane. And I had the experience of waiting for my order as they were cooking it. And the other lady that was stocking the fridge started talking about the weather. I was the only other person in the shop. And immediately she started talking about the weather. My mind sort of reflected on the Zoom meeting that we'd had, and I used that exact example as the opportunity for the miracle, right? Don't join with that mundane with nothing, just leave it empty. And so I did. I left it empty. And sure enough, there was a moment. I didn't respond to her questions about the weather. And she sort of looked at me and then went back about her business. And I was in my mind, I'm just asking, I'm in the process of asking, how do I respond to this, Father? You know, because sometimes there is a response, but thinking of my processing, I guess, and what should I say, etc. Because I didn't want to join in the conversation about the weather. I was having a moment of resistance there. And which isn't really a moment of resistance. It's a moment of wanting to choose again, right? Seen rightly. Choose differently. And she went on to something else about how quickly the year had gone by. Like she didn't even give me a chance to which is fine, because that brought us into the new thing. Oh, time flies so quickly, she said. And all I could say, it just sort of came out, right, which is perfect. All I could say was something, I can't remember exactly now, but I don't think time flies at all, right? I don't think time is actually flying at all. And one of the things in the Course Jesus says is no time is actually passing. So to put it into her context of flying, it's the same declaration. And it was about making that declaration that, and I got my fish and chips and my food and went outside and sat down at one of the tables there. And I couldn't help but have a little moment of chuckle to myself. And whatever occurred in that, I don't know. It wasn't for me to know in that particular moment, but perhaps she went about her business thinking I was a rather odd fellow. I don't know. But you have to represent somehow, even in just such a small way like that. It doesn't really matter. Even in you're changing the narrative, you're changing the purpose that you want the relationship to be about by declaring yourself in some kind of a way to, one, not be about that old storyline, that old human dysfunctional kind of non-communicative, non-confronting, and I don't know if confronting is a great word to put in there, but you're saying, no, not that, I want something else. And then leaving the something else up to the Holy Spirit. All right, so one of the things that happens and you'll find this when you're engaged with anyone in a conversation, is you'll recognize the cycles. Oh, I've had this conversation my whole life. I've had this come around again and again. And sometimes the cycles are triggering. Sometimes the cycles will upset you, and you'll be like, there's that person again. I owe them $50. They're going to mention it. They know I don't have the money. It's like, why do they have to just mention it? Why can't they just trust me that I'll pay them when I've got the money, or whatever, like any human interaction, any single one, right? Seen rightly, all relationships are learning opportunities. So there's never a moment where you're engaged with anyone in the world for any reason other than that you're in the school of life and that you are learning about yourself. Right? And just getting some light. Oh boy. Little word from our sponsor. You're never anywhere for no reason. So if you can understand that the human, and I'm saying the human as in the body identified association, the false identity of self association that the mind has until it's transformed, always sees time as an opportunity to extend time, to drag its feet. Somewhere it knows it is in the resurrection. It knows that it is going backwards in time actually, and that the limit on time has been reached. Thus the resurrection, death, there is no death. But it can't do anything about that, but it will still drag its feet kicking and screaming, and ego is still powerful if given the use of the Christ light within you for that purpose of corruption and delay, etc., which is why being repurposed and repurposing yourself, your higher self connection and your lower self avatar usefulness is something you have to be about if you want to align with the frequency and the harmonic and the nature of atonement as being able to be the witness to it occurring in your life, right? You've got to get on board to see what's going on. So one of the things that happens, I find often in conversations with people, and I've just got one particular, I can't remember if it was a man or a woman, not that it really matters, I was talking to several years ago. This is going back 3 or 4 years. And we were having this intense conversation. It was a social conversation, but it was about the course. And this person had told me, I read the course many years ago when it first came out and blah, blah, blah. And they had the green book. There's always this sort of alluding to the authenticity of things by age, which is why the green book was one of the first books that ever came out after the 3. But it's the same thing that occurs, as if credibility is implied by longevity or something like that, which is not necessarily the case. Credibility is implied by reliability. Reliability comes about with understanding and use, right? So practice. And in the course of the conversation, I began to become somewhat aware that the nature of what was being presented by this person in the course of our conversation didn't really line up with where I was at with things with the course, with my understanding of it and everything. And it came about that I was prompted to ask him, did you do the workbook? And the response I got was, workbook? Question mark. And I suddenly realized that it's possible for someone to delude themselves that they have done the course, which to me means reading the text, teacher's manual, and doing the workbook, right? There are 3 components to the course, 3 sections. Text and workbook mainly. I mean, the teacher's manual is more questions and answers, but still incredibly helpful. But the fact that this person didn't even know there was a workbook. And so we went on in the discussion to talk about the workbook, or I talked about the workbook for a brief moment, explaining the lessons and what they were for to make sense of the text and to bring the practical application of the principles that the text is based on to life, in actual living life, in actual awareness, to affect your conscious impression or conscious perception of the life that you seem to be experiencing here in the world. And that was too much. I remember the conversation all kind of came to an end there. And, well, I've got to be getting on and, thanks for the chat and all of that sort of thing. And that's just the ego defending itself, right? Or that's how I saw it at that time. But maybe they did have to be getting on. But generally, I find that when I become too confronting or too assertive with people because of my natural predilection to want to represent the truth and represent the means to the truth, people tend to get like this. The light starts to affect them, as it did to me just before, and they itchy and get antsy, and all of a sudden they've either got to go or they've got to be still and undergo whatever is apparently or seems to be occurring in that moment, right? That's the same thing that happens and occurs when you leave the gap, when you leave a space, when you're in one of those ridiculous conversations and you refuse to join in it because you've realized your cycle, which is something I didn't really get into in the Zoom yesterday. I did, after the Zoom finished, I wanted to do like a little addendum. I don't know how you do that, to put in there that you'll be aware of these things as they come around, because you're becoming more and more aware of your cycles in the relationships, because a lesson repeats until it's learned. And you'll realize the same kind of energetic presence in a person, a situation, or an event. Let's say each time it comes around, you'll be, oh, this is the same as that, or not this again, or not, and it's most commonly seen in relationships with people, like special relationships. If I had a girlfriend, let's say, she would reflect back to me unlearnt lessons. It's not like a new person brings a new opportunity where perhaps I can have a better relationship with this person. No, I'm just going to have a different learning opportunity. It looks different, but it'll be the same energetics. Once that honeymoon period wears off, you'll begin to settle into seeing how alike everything is, and how the universal lesson of letting go is presented again and again and again through various forms and situations. And so you do become aware of these moments. And I use the example of talking about the weather because I think that's a common one everyone can relate to, but it's not necessarily just like that. I mean, everybody's individual relationships are different, and they look different on the surface. And so what you relate to as a conversation about the weather for me might be something completely different from you. There's my neighbor, blah, blah, blah. We always talk about this, that, and the other, and I'm sick of it. I want something to change there. I'm keen for growth in me, and also to release my neighbor from that mundane, non-connecting cycle of repetitious kind of nothingness that goes on the surface, because what we're looking for is an instant. We're looking for a holy instant where two minds can recognize their oneness and become glad. It's as simple as that. It's also as difficult as that, because the mind complicates it. So in the fish and chip shop yesterday, actually, I think it was a hamburger shop. I call it a fish and chip shop. But yesterday, when I walked in there and I made my order, and then the woman who was putting the stuff in the fridge, the bottles in the fridge, and she said to me, oh, isn't it lovely weather, or whatever she said, something. It just went bam and smacked me in the consciousness, like it was like, here's the opportunity. And I listened and I allowed for the moment to be there. And it was kind of beautiful. I mean, it wasn't any big play the trumpet kind of holy instant that, I mean, I've had various kinds of holy instants where you realize that something shifts, something totally goes on. This one was just kind of like a garden variety. I don't know if there's varieties of holy instants, but perhaps my mind, because I'd walked out the door and I'd adjusted to that uncomfortable moment, I guess, by doing so, walked out the door to go and have a seat. Maybe that moment was meant to go on a bit longer with that woman. I don't know, but anyway, it was perfect. It's always perfect, whatever you get out of it. I mean, there was that moment of, you know. But anyway, so I wanted to read this from the white edition to kind of demonstrate connecting with the material rather than reading the material, to hearing what is behind the words, because the words are just symbols. They represent something else, okay? And it's the something else from this living message that I want to connect with, I want to hear. You know, when Jesus says you have ears but don't hear, I want to hear it. You know, and I'm reminded of, I think it's, what's the one, The Meaning of Life, Monty Python, where he's giving the talk. Jesus is on the mount and giving the talk, and there's all the people at the back who can't really hear properly. And he says, "Blessed are the cheese makers," or something or other, you know, like up there. And the woman's missing the whole thing about what the actual context of the parable is about. Oh, isn't that lovely? He's giving something for the cheese makers, you know. And then the discussion ensues about cheese making or whatever. I don't know. It goes to something else. I can't quite remember the full thing, but it's classic. It's just classic, missing the point kind of thing. And that's what happens in our relationships. We miss the point because we're not aware and we're not vigilant for, I should put my finger there, I'm not aware and I'm not vigilant for the fact that there's actually something else going on a deeper level, or on a higher level perhaps, for all of these relationships where we come together to recognize our holiness and become glad, right? And it really takes for one to have to step into that space. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm obviously consciously out in my world today going to become more obvious and more aligned with it and more vigilant for it. But when you realize you're in a living classroom and that everything's a lesson or a blessing, if you don't see the blessing, like Jesus says in the Course, everything's either love or a call for love. That's what you see. You either see love or a call for love, right? Now, in a place where my cycles come around again and I'm sick and tired of the same old stuff, and I recognize that I need to change. Who is it that needs to change? Me. If I keep interacting with the same old script, the same old story in the same old way, nothing's going to change. Like the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing again and again, expecting a different result. So somewhere I'm going to surrender to the Holy Spirit. I don't know how to change. I just need something else to happen other than this, because I'm done, right? And you never know when you reach that point where you're honestly done. You never know where you reach that point where it's not just lip service that I'm done anymore. I actually mean it, because I can't do another day, right? And that's, in the greater sense, in the whole picture, that's the dark night of the soul. I'm done with humanity. I'm done with my life. I'm done with this whole thing. I'm done with forgiveness. I'm done with everything. I don't even want there to be anyone to forgive. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's the prayer of the heart. And that's also the dark night of the soul, pretty much as I underwent it. But it's important that being aware of one's own superficial nature, the desire, because it's consciously done, right? Denial doesn't happen by accident. It's consciously manipulated. My teacher Ted would say that the ego is suspicious, vicious, cunning, and baffling. And it's true. And a great deal of the course, in the outset of the course, is dedicated to making it clear to the person reading the course just how it is. You're always sabotaging your own best interests, right? Self-sabotage, that's the sort of catchphrase for that, I guess, these days. But one of the lessons in the course specifically that I love is I do not perceive my own best interests. And then somewhere in the lesson it says something along the lines of, if you could realize the truth of this statement today, you've gone a long way to undoing the nature of how you see things, etc., right? Because you're not, most of the time, you're not even aware what you're doing. Finger on my nose. I'm not even aware of what I'm doing. I'm walking around like this automaton, and it's only in moments where somebody asks me how the weather is that I actually think there's an opportunity to get something for myself out of that person, right? Because the ego's intention is always to get, never to give. Get. My own comfort and my own pleasure is my guiding rule of thumb. And eventually you get sick of that, because you realize that nothing out there that you see can ever bring you happiness. No mountains of money, no possessions, no fame, no knowing the right people, none of it. All the TikTokers out there, sorry, but it's never going to bring you what you're actually looking for. The one thing you're looking for is God, and that's within yourself. The kingdom of heaven is within, and where it is, that's where you have to seek for it, right? So I'm going to read this now, and it's just 2 pages. I just asked Jesus, what would you have me read? And I opened the book, and there it is, the 2 pages. And I tried to close the book again, actually. I had some little moment of, no, I want to read something that's more flowy, more sort of in the... And then I opened the book again, and it opened up at the same page again. So it's me trying to second guess Jesus. But, sometimes you like to read things that seem to have a logical start, and they sort of, people can follow on. But anyway, so I'm going to read it. And just watch yourself, all right? Do this as a little practice, a little homework perhaps. Just watch where it is you go in your mind when I'm reading. If you notice your mind trying to wander off rather than paying full attention and fully connecting with what's being presented. Okay? Now, because the mind is heavily loaded in denial initially when you first start this course and the lessons and everything, the weights are loaded against you. So you have to put in this effort. There has to be this willingness. And if you wanted to ask the Holy Spirit to help you listen, that's fine. I've done that many times. Help me to even read the words on the page. And one of the funny things that happens is quite often when we're having our round robin of reading in the Zoom, somebody will read the little review of one of those first 50 lessons, and they'll make words up that aren't even there. How do you read a word that isn't there, right? And then they'll keep reading as if they didn't even notice the error, and it'll totally change the whole construct of the sentence or the meaning of the sentence. And they're not connected, right? They're not connected. And I've done the same myself in the very early days with this. They're not connecting with what they're reading. It's not really going in, right? If I said to you, if you can memorize these 3 sentences, I'll give you $1 million, you would put in the kind of effort, the kind of conscious attention that would enable you to actually allow that to permeate into a place where it actually is valuable to you, right? Remember, the ego always speaks first, and the ego always listens first, and also always sees first. You can't avoid that. This is the domain of ego. Time and space is the domain of ego. And whilst ego is not your friend, it's also not your enemy. It's just something that needs to be transformed. It's a part of the mind that has learned badly and exists in error, following the regimen of a purpose that it was given, which is now no longer helpful. Okay? So that part of the mind that believes in the physical nature, this part that I'm using to make this video, has to be transformed to a significant level where in the Course it says, forgiveness will bring me near enough to heaven that the love of God can reach down to me and raise me up to him. Right? So there's an approach to God. It will bring me near enough to heaven, near enough to that inner realm, that inner kingdom, through my meditative, prayerful, and studious sort of applications. Salvation, however, is not beyond immediate learning. And it's the experience that I'm always advocating for. Experience, because experience is the teacher. And I'm talking about an out of time experience, an out of the world, out of the universe, no third dimension experience. Not an out of body experience. I'm talking about a no body experience. Complete formlessness. That doesn't mean that purification won't still be required if you wanted to undertake being helpful on earth after that experience occurs to you as a teacher of God, let's say in some sort of final identity crisis. It's not really a crisis. It's like, how do I put it? It's like when you have a party and you invite a lot of friends around, and then in the morning there's the mess and you've got to clean up the mess. It's kind of like that. You look out at your patio and there's plastic cups everywhere and there's streamers and it's like, oh no, and you've got a hangover. Oh no, I'm going to need a miracle, right? You become your brother's servant. You become your brother's keeper. You become, and I remember, what's the saying? It goes, I'd rather be a street sweeper in heaven than a ruler in hell, right? And there you go. So anyway, I'm going to read this. Just see where you go with it. See how you do. And you'll probably notice your mind wanders off. People might distract you, whatever. If they distract you, just recognize that as a manifestation of your own mind. Okay? Make a decision. Don't be distracted. Ignore it. Your prime objective is to focus. Your prime objective is same in meditation. If someone knocks on the door, ignore it. You're meditating. Nothing else matters, right? It's divine. This is a sacred activity that you're undertaking. Let the whole world burn down. It doesn't matter. You're staying here in this circle with me and we're going to do this together. And the whole purpose of it is to watch your mind where it goes with something. Okay? And you'll see where you want to let yourself off the hook and sort of not have to confront your own disbelief and all of that sort of thing. There's always a yes, but. So I'm just going to read it. It just starts at a random place, okay? Could do with some water, but anyway. The ego, on the other hand, regards the function of time as one of extending itself in place of eternity. For, like the Holy Spirit, the ego interprets the goal of time as its own. The continuity of past and future under its direction is the only purpose the ego perceives in time, and it closes over the present so that no gap in its own continuity can occur, which I believe is exactly what I just talked about and what we talked about in our Zoom yesterday. No wonder he wanted me to read this. It's always perfect. It's perfect. Its continuity then would keep you in time, while the Holy Spirit would release you from it. It is his interpretation of the means of salvation which you must learn to accept if you would share his goal of salvation for you. You too will interpret the function of time as you interpret yours. If you accept your function in the world of time as healing, you will emphasize only the aspect of time in which healing can occur. For healing cannot be accomplished in the past and must be accomplished in the present to release the future. This interpretation ties the future to the present and extends the present rather than the past. But if you interpret your function as destruction, you will lose sight of the present and hold on to the past to ensure a destructive future. That's powerful. and time will be as you interpret it, for of itself it is nothing. We have said that you have but two emotions, love and fear. One is changeless, but continually exchanged, being offered by the eternal to the eternal. Oh. In this exchange it is extended, for it increases as it is given. The other has many forms, for the content of individual illusions differs greatly, which I believe I just said as well. It's always surprises me. Well, I don't know why I'm surprised. Everything's always perfect. Yet they have one thing in common. They are all insane. They are made of sights which are not seen and sounds which are not heard. They make up a private world which cannot be shared, for they are meaningful only to their maker, and so they have no meaning at all. In this world, their maker moves alone, for only he perceives them. Each one peoples his world with figures from his individual past, and it is because of this that private worlds do differ. Yet the figures that he sees were never real, for they are made up only of his reactions to his brothers and do not include their reactions to him. Therefore, he does not see that he made them and that they are not whole. They are not whole. For these figures have no witnesses, being perceived in one separate mind only. It is through these strange and shadowy figures that the insane relate to their insane world, for they see only those who remind them of these images, and it is to them that they relate. Thus do they communicate, get this, me communicating to me. Thus do they communicate with those who are not there, and it is they who answer them. It reminds me of that little nursery rhyme. Yesterday upon the stair I saw a man who was not there. He was not there again today. I wish that man would go away. And no one hears their answer save him who called upon them, and he alone believes they answered him. Projection makes perception, and you cannot see beyond it. Again and again, men have attacked each other because they saw in them a shadow figure in their own private world, and thus it is that you must attack yourself first. For what you attack is not in others. Its only reality is in your own mind, and by attacking others, you are literally attacking what is not there. The delusional can be very destructive, for they do not recognize that they have condemned themselves. They do not wish to die, yet they will not let condemnation go. And so they separate into private worlds where everything is disordered and where what is within appears to be without. Yet what is within they do not see, for the reality of their brothers they cannot see. You have but two emotions, yet in your private world you react to each of them as though it were the other. For love cannot abide in a world apart, where when it comes it is not recognized. If you see your own hatred as your brother, you are not seeing him. Everyone draws nigh unto what he loves and recoils from what he fears. And you react with fear to love and draw away from it. Yet fear attracts you, and believing it is love, you call it to yourself. Your private world is filled with the figures of fear you have invited into it, and all the love your brothers offer you, you do not see. As you look with open eyes upon your world, it must occur to you that you have withdrawn into insanity. You see what is not there, and you hear what is soundless. Your behavioral manifestations of emotions are the opposite of what the emotions are. You communicate with no one, and you are as isolated from reality as if you were alone in all the universe. In your madness, you overlook reality completely, and you see only your own split mind everywhere you look. Whew. God calls you and you do not hear, for you are preoccupied with your own voice, and the vision of Christ is not in your sight, for you look upon yourself alone. Little children, would you offer this to your Father? For if you offer it to yourself, you are offering it to him, and he will not return it, for it is unworthy of you, because it is unworthy of him. Yet he would release you from it and set you free. His sane answer tells you that what you have offered yourself is not true, but his offering to you has never changed. You who know not what you do can learn what insanity is and look beyond it. Boom. It is given you to learn how to deny insanity and come forth from your private world in peace. You will see all that you denied in your brothers because you denied it in yourself. For you will love them, and by drawing nigh unto them, you will draw them to yourself, perceiving them as witnesses to your reality, which you share with God. And Tina, if you're watching this video, could you put the link, please? I know you probably always do, but anyway, where you can get the white edition. Book A is the text. Book B, you have to order the 2 books. It's a bit more expensive. Sorry about that. But we don't have a way to drop ship as one book without actually printing them and putting them into storage somewhere. So it's easier to drop ship them, but they have to come as 2 books. That's it. That's all for this video. I would recommend that when Tina puts up the Zoom from yesterday, that in conjunction with this video, maybe Tina, we can somehow couple these 2 videos together, because they are very much associated one with the other. And I love how everything's always perfect. Everything I was just conveying in my preamble. And I promise you I did not read those pages. I read the first couple of lines looking for some sort of sense of what was going to be presented, but I didn't read the whole thing like that. But it's always perfect. Love is always perfect because there's nothing to to oppose it. What cannot be perfect in a singular experience of self, in a singular reality? Peace.